Good talk.
Courtney will be sending out to everyone who is connected with the Pickwick Club, with the Santa Cruz Fellowship, announcements of the meeting of the Philadelphia group, because this year the Philadelphia Fellowship and the Santa Cruz Fellowship are both focusing on Bleak House. And there may be other groups. Courtney just gave me some information about another group, which is not a Dickens Fellowship, but a reading group, a book club that is focusing on Bleak House. And so we may have members of that group as well attending. So
Oh,
I think we should begin. Uh, and I will introduce myself and then a couple of other people. All of you will have heard from Courtney Mahaney. Courtney is the assistant director of the Dickens Project, and she is on your screen. And Courtney is here to help me, to assist me with any technological problems that come up. And she will also help me to recognize people who would like to speak if I neglect to do so. And if you would like to participate in the discussion, of course, use the raised hand function, which is familiar, I hope, to everyone on Zoom. Or you can just raise your physical hand, and Courtney will spot your hand as a signal that you would like to speak. I am the director of the Dickens Project at UC Santa Cruz, and I am a member of the Santa Cruz Fellowship. The president of the Dickens Fellowship is Wayne Batten, and Wayne is here. Wayne, could you say something and raise your hand just so people can see you? I saw Wayne, but uh, anyway, Wayne will be participating today. And Wayne helped me to organize the plan of reading for this year's uh, Pickwick Club. And I particularly want to welcome the Philadelphia members. I should say at the beginning that I recently had surgery, thyroid surgery, and they came in through my neck to remove the thyroid gland, and so I have a little bit of a croaky voice. This is not my usual voice, but I hope that I can stay audible and that I'll be able to sustain my voice through the 2 hours that we have here together.
you sound
Um,
improved.
okay,
Last
good,
week, I,
good. So apologies for, I never know what voice I'm going to have when I wake up in the morning. It varies from day to day, and it sometimes varies from hour to hour.
Well, thank you for being here.
yes.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here. So I want to do a little bit of overview about Bleak House and just remind you about a few basic premises. This is Dickens's ninth novel. It was published in serial form from March of 1852 to September of 1853. That's the usual serialization format that Dickens used, or the most common of the serial formats that he adopted, which is 20 monthly parts in 19 months. And the last part was a double number. Each monthly number sold for 1 shilling, so it was relatively cheap. And the last double number sold for 2 shillings. Um, we will be reading the novel for the Pickwick Club over 9 months, starting in September and going until June. So that means that we will be reading usually 2 monthly numbers together. So we are following roughly the chronological format of the novel. I hope that people will pay attention to the monthly number parts because, as Dickens wrote, he thought of the monthly number as a structural unit, as a form, a sort of small form within the larger format of his novel. So please pay attention to where a monthly number begins and where a monthly number ends. Dickens was 40 years old. He was at the height of his power as a novelist, not quite a young man. He'd already written 8 novels, but still a relatively young, middle-aged man. And the novel that preceded Bleak House was David Copperfield, which was a great popular success and was also, as I'm sure you all know, a novel that was very autobiographical and that was written in the first person. And Bleak House is a kind of continuation of the experiment that Dickens had made with David Copperfield, in that half of the novel is written in the first person and told by Esther, the first person narrator. So when he's using that form, he's doing something innovative, relatively speaking, in terms of the form of the Victorian novel. There are a few ground rules that I want to that accompany this format. The assignment for each monthly meeting of the Pickwick Club is to read a certain number of chapters, and the ground rule is that we try to pretend that we are reading the novel for the first time, following the form that Victorian readers would have been familiar with. So the ground rule that accompanies that is that we're not allowed to talk about anything that happens later than chapter 7 for today. And that's very hard to do. It's probably impossible, but I want you to try as well as you can to pretend that you are reading like a 19th century reader and experiencing this novel for the first time. And I want to ask at this point if there is, in fact, anyone in our group who is reading Bleak House for the first time. Is there any person?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. Is there more? Yes. Okay. And Russell is also doing it. So you and Priscilla, thank you. I hope, Courtney, would you remember these lovely people who have indicated that they are first-time readers, because they will be very useful members of our group, because they are authentic first-time readers. Kathleen as well. Okay. And we will want you to, and Pauline. Oh,
No, I wanted to ask you something. I'm
yes,
sorry.
you want to ask something. So, okay. So a raised hand is a question. So go ahead.
I'm sorry. For some reason, my raised hand function isn't working. Well, I wanted to say, I listened to this on Libby for the first time in the spring, but now I'm reading it with you in the order we're supposed to read it, and it's just so totally different. It's just so amazing.
How is
it's not the same. Thank you.
How is it different? Please, I'm interested to know.
Well, already, for example, when we meet the oldest daughter, the scribe for Mrs. Jellyby, when I listened to the presentation, I just thought she was totally sullen. And when you get into reading about her, she wasn't. She opened up to Esther. She was needing a mother figure, which Esther provided, and I didn't get that in the reading for some reason. I mean, it was interesting to hear people speaking, but of course, it's so much deeper to read it word for word.
Yes, yes. Well, the great advantage of reading the physical book is that you can stop and look closely at the language. Whereas when you listen to a novel, no matter how wonderful the reader is, and Miriam Margolyes is just as good as they get as a reader, a dramatic reader, still the story keeps going, and you can't stop and look at the language and
Exactly.
appreciate Dickens as a writer rather than Dickens as someone who is almost a dramatist. Dickens was very interested in the drama, himself an excellent performer, himself an excellent
Like why, man? Just
reader.
put the panels up on the roof.
Yes. So anyway, that ground rule about not spoiling for our first time readers is something that I hope we will be able to follow. I wanted to put there's several contexts that we might, as we talk these 9 months about the novel, that I wanted to just mention. And Catherine, I'll get to you in just a second. We could set this novel in a biographical context, and occasionally I'll have something to say about Dickens' biography. We can put it in a historical context, what's happening in the years 1852, 53, or prior to that. And we can also put this novel in a literary context. And it's that literary context that I wanted to mention just briefly as what kind of novel is Bleak House? How is it similar to, and how is it different from most Victorian novels? And most Victorian novels, this is a huge generalization, and there are many exceptions, but most Victorian novels are domestic novels. That is, they have a marriage plot as the central story. And does Bleak House have a marriage plot? When does the marriage plot emerge? When are we aware of marriage as an issue in the novel? It doesn't happen right away. When I say marriage plot, I mean people who are not yet married and who will find each other and be married by the end of the novel. Another very prevalent literary form of the 19th century novel, also usually a domestic form, is the Bildungsroman, the novel of personal growth and development. And Bleak House early on seems to have an element that conforms to that. I mean, the story of Esther Summerson, who tells us in chapter 3 and chapter 4 about her childhood. And so we are early in the novel expecting to follow that story as a prominent story in the novel. And then another very common form, particularly that emerges in the 1840s and Dickens, of course, is writing it in the early 1850s, is the social problem novel. This is sometimes called the industrial novel, but that's too limited a way to think about it. And Bleak House is certainly a social problem novel, and its presence, its power as a social problem novel is apparent from the very first chapter. And that this is the famous novel about the law. And most lawyers, even if they haven't read Bleak House, are familiar with Bleak House and with the interminable law case of Jarndyce and Jarndyce. I should make a little slightly pedantic note about that. Please notice that the name of the case, the famous case, is Jarndyce and Jarndyce. It's not Jarndyce versus Jarndyce. And many people make the mistake, and we might even think about why it's jaundice and jaundice as opposed to jaundice versus jaundice. But Catherine,
Yeah, I just wanted to say something going back to the first timers. There are some spoilers in the footnotes. And I was reading part of it yesterday and I was like, oh no, we should not be saying this right now. So if you want to avoid spoilers, you might want to take the footnotes, maybe don't look at them too much.
yeah, it's a problem because the footnotes are helpful. They help to explain lots of contemporary references that are obscure for us as modern readers, but they will reveal things that are going to happen. So I want you to read the footnotes and then forget everything they say that indicates something that's going to happen. So again, it's an impossible task, and we're just sort of pretending that we can do that. Speaking of editions, I highly recommend the Penguin Classics edition of the novel. And the reason is that it includes, it has a good introduction and it has useful footnotes, but it includes all of the original illustrations. And another way of situating Bleak House in relation to other Victorian novels is that it is a multimedia novel. It's an illustrated novel, and the illustrations are an integral part of the novel. Dickens worked closely with his illustrator. He told his illustrator which images he wanted to, or which scenes he wanted to have illustrated. And you can think of them, the Hablo Brown and Dickens, as collaborators in producing the visual images. And I will always show the illustrations that accompany the monthly numbers that we are reading. So today we'll look at the first 4 illustrations and we'll talk about them. So Francis.
Yeah, the Barnes and Noble edition is extremely well written. It's annotated and it has all the drawings. It's an excellent edition, and the print is bigger than the Penguin edition. So I like the Barnes and Noble edition.
Okay. The important thing for me is that you have access to the illustrations and that as you read the assigned sections of the novel for our purposes, that you familiarize yourself with the illustrations that accompany them. And when I'm going to show the 4 illustrations at some point in our discussion today, and I'll comment about the structure of those illustrations and also about the captions to those illustrations, which are different in the original publication of the novel than the way that they appear in modern editions, the Penguin or the Barnes and Noble. I'm not familiar with the Barnes and Noble, so I can't comment about that. So those are the ground rules. I am the facilitator of discussion for today, and I'm doing more talking than I like to do and that I usually do. This is a book club, and each month we will have a member of the book club as the discussion leader. And Glenna Matthews, who's a longtime member of the Pickwick Club, has volunteered to be the discussion leader for next month's section. Courtney will send out the reading assignment and reminder about the dates, and Glenna will lead the discussion. I will be present, but I'm not going to be the teacher. This is not a class where I teach the novel to you. You will teach it to yourselves. You will read it together collaboratively, and we will discover the novel. and I'll come along for the ride. I want to learn from you, and I want to learn particularly from those authentic first-time readers, because their experience of the novel is something that I value highly. And so I'm going to ask them to speak about what they are learning and what they are enjoying. So when I attended the Philadelphia fellowship meeting last month, one of the things that Pat Vinci said is that Dickens is everywhere. And it's hard for a week to go by when you don't find a reference to Dickens in the popular press or online. Dickens remains alive today. And I was very pleased to find that Bleak House has been in the news lately. And I don't know if any of you came across the reference to Bleak House and to a study that was done of college students reading comprehension at two Midwestern universities. And Courtney, could you put the slide up just so that people can have the reference to this? So that's the introductory chapter slide. And the second slide that Courtney will now put up is to an article that was published by Grouply, by a group of education professors. Susan Carlson was the lead author. And the title of the article is "They Don't Read Very Well, a study of the reading comprehension skills of students at two Midwestern universities," in the journal called CEA Critic, that's the College English Association Critic, volume 86, number 1, in March of 2024. So this is an example of Dickens still alive today and still being discussed in the popular press. And this is a study done by professors of education of the ability of students to read college level texts. They took, I'm going to describe the study to you. They asked 85 undergraduate students at two universities in the state of Kansas to read the first to read the first 7 paragraphs of Bleak House, and then to translate what they read into their own language and explain what is going on. And they used several criteria for the ability to understand what was going on and the ability to translate the first sentence by sentence, the first 7 paragraphs of Bleak House into their own language. And according to their criteria, they divided the group of 85 English majors. They were English majors, juniors and seniors for the most part. There were a few sophomores and maybe some younger students, into 3 categories: competent readers, problematic readers, and proficient readers. And competent readers, according to their definition, are readers who are able to understand the words in a text that they read, but who would have serious difficulty continuing to read an entire novel. Problematic readers are readers who would not be able to understand the first 7 paragraphs of Bleak House. And proficient readers are ones who could understand and So this study was, as the title of this article indicates, they don't read very well. 58% were competent readers, 38% were problematic, and only 5% of the readers, of the students, were proficient readers. So you can understand how this got into the popular press. Everyone is saying tisk, tisk, isn't it terrible? Students don't know how to read. And there was an analysis of the reasons for this that include the pandemic and social media and sort of the usual culprits. But I am skeptical about this study because I think the first 7 paragraphs of Bleak House are very difficult to read and very challenging and very wonderful at the same time. But I think that the authors of this article made a mistake in choosing this particular text because this particular text is a magnificent piece of writing, but has much about it that is difficult to grasp. And one of the things that makes it difficult, we're going to look at it in just a second, is that it's not written in complete sentences. Much of the beginning of this novel is written in sentence fragments. So Courtney, could we move now to the first paragraph of Bleak House? So I'm going to read this, and again, with apologies for my voice, which is froggy, and apologies also for not being Miriam Margolyes. So, London, Michaelmas term lately over, and the Lord Chancellor sitting in Lincoln's Inn Hall. Implacable November weather, as much mud in the streets as if the waters had but newly retired from the face of the earth. And it would not be wonderful to meet a megalosaurus 40 feet long or so, waddling like an elephantine lizard up Holborn Hill. Smoke lowering down from chimney pots, making a soft black drizzle with flakes of soot in it as big as full-grown snowflakes, gone into mourning, one might imagine, for the death of the sun. Dogs undistinguishable in mire, horses scarcely better, splashed to their very blinkers, foot passengers jostling one another's umbrellas in a general infection of ill temper and losing their foothold at street corners where tens of thousands of other foot passengers have been slipping and sliding since the day broke, if this day ever broke, adding new deposits to the crust upon crust of mud, sticking at those points tenaciously to the pavement and accumulating at compound interest. So let me invite comment from all of you about this opening paragraph of a novel, and think of it as a way to begin a novel. Think of it as a way to begin a Victorian novel, and of other 19th century novels that you have read. So, Sarah. You may be muted, Sarah, so I'm not hearing you.
Okay, so I had problems with the first 2 chapters, and I just read it. And then after I finished the 7th chapter, I went back and read it again. And just knowing who is talking about, who are the people, and reading it the second time was amazing, because his references, his comparison between the weather and to what happened in the story was very meaningful after you knew something about the story. So I don't know, in this experiment, in this article, I definitely don't blame the students that were that understood but didn't want to continue, and I worry about the educator more than about the students because they should have known. Yeah.
Yes, I think the experiment was rigged in a certain way, but
Yeah.
yeah, if you look at and this is common experience, it's my experience as a teacher is that students often say that Bleak House is hard to get into. It's a
Yeah.
novel that is difficult to get into, and I think that has to do with the form of the beginning. But
Exactly.
Mary, go ahead. Thank you, sir.
Well, certainly the atmosphere is bleak, dark and misty and muddy and dirty. A lot of things which happen, it recalls many things which happen in the novel itself. It's not, and I like the last paragraph, the last sentence of the paragraph, because he uses the metaphor of deposit and compound interest. And that leads us too into the financial aspects of the novel. So I like that very much. And this one passing remark, we've been talking about this article. I taught SAT preparation to students several years ago. And at that time, passages from well-known novels, and I remember one from Great Expectations, were part of the reading process. Now I have no idea. I don't even know if the SAT's around anymore. But yeah, so the students were required to engage in a pretty high level of reading.
Yes. And the syntax is more complex than much of contemporary discourse. There are topical references. Michaelmas term, for example, requires a footnote. And but students who were tested, many of the students, roughly, you know, 3/4 of the students were not able to determine that this chapter deals with a law court. They really were completely lost. And so you can understand the sense of discouragement that they might feel if they did not have some other incentive or some other way of understanding what is going on in this novel. So, Glenna.
Yeah, I think that this is one of the most stunning openings of any Dickens novel, but it's not for the novice. I mean, when you read Great Expectations, boy, you get grabbed immediately. This novel, and one of the things that fascinates me about Bleak House is that over and over again, you get this kind of impressionistic prose that one associates with, with modernism. At least I'm not a lit professor, but so you have this really wonderfully impressionistic prose, but it doesn't sink a narrative hook into you like The Convict Behind the Gravestone. So yeah, I agree. This is not a good one to use. But while I have the floor,
Please.
My granddaughter, who was not an English major, just told me to reread Northanger Abbey. And she said that when she read Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, she felt she had to read The Mysteries of Udolpho and The Monk in order to be fully situated. So there are young people who are reading.
Wonderful. More power to your granddaughter. Yeah, so Pat.
Yes, I think it's mind-boggling. I think we should put the focus on Dickens and how the hell he thought of this stuff. I mean, I think it's just totally brilliant. And the thing, he pulls you in, but you have to take your time. And he's at a point in his life where he doesn't have to go right into the story because people in the 19th century are used to reading him. But I mean, this just shows the genius, how he thinks of these things. I mean, throughout the whole novel, everyone that speaks, it's just, that's what he's about, listening to these sentences that people he comes up with them. It's just like a miracle how he did it. It's kind of like comparing him to, well, we're letting dark, it's a dark story night. Now there's a dark story. That's the difference between, a writer of fiction and a writer of literature. But again, it is hard for people to come into it. But I think when you read Dickens, like I read him in high school, so I was prepared, but it took me a long time because I was so young when I read this. I was in my 20s. And you just have to take your time with them. But I think when you start to appreciate them, you put the effort into it because you realize how brilliant it is.
Okay.
I don't know how I have no idea.
I agree completely. And we should talk more about what the specific aspects of this paragraph are that make it brilliant, that make it so powerful for you. We've already had one good comment about the metaphor of deposit upon deposit at compound interest. So there's a whole financial range of reference that we should pay attention to. What else stands out in the language of this paragraph? So Jessica.
Well, first of all, I'm curious to read that article because I really do think it's unconscionable to throw this paragraph at a bunch of American students and expect them to understand so many of these references. They might have understood if it said like the Supreme Court or something like that, but to expect them to understand the specifics of 19th century English law is really unfair to judge their reading abilities that way. But I just wanted to say in this chapter, I think my absolute favorite part is the flakes of soot as big as full-grown snowflakes. It captures that dirtiness of London that, and no spoilers, but that comes back over and over again throughout this. Even you think about Great Expectations and Pip's first impressions of London, and how it's not just a city, but it's a dirty city, and how what an impression that would make on a reader, and also on someone coming to London like Esther for the first time.
So those dirty snowflakes are both realistic. Dickens is the first word, the first full sentence of this novel is London, and this is a novel about London, and it's almost like a journalist's byline that London is I'm reporting from London. So Dickens is a reporter. He was a journalist reporting on the weather in London, and this is but it's more than a weather report. It's snowflakes gone into mourning, which is a reference to death and dying, which is another theme that we will likely encounter in this novel. For the death of the sun. For the death of the sun, that's a different kind of death. That's a kind of extinction, a cosmic distinction. So if we think about the spatial and temporal references of this paragraph, they have at that point expanded beyond London. They've expanded into the extinction of existence as we know it with the death of the sun. But it's also a kind of joke. It's funny. But snowflakes can't go into mourning. So you have to appreciate both the humor and the cosmic dimensions of that reference. So Russell.
This is probably a bit simplistic, but I think that that this paragraph puts you into the time period of industrial London, so you feel like you were really there. And I just wrote down some things that came to my mind to describe it. It was like its atmosphere, the setting, the tone, a feeling of bleakness, melancholy, gray, just an idea of what it was like to be there. And then just a side note, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and this idea of the black, we grew up with that from the steel mills, that there was always a black sugar like quality on your windowsill, and they used to say that the the men who worked in the city that wore white shirts would have to change their shirts as the day wore on because your shirt just got so dirty. So this is not unrealistic in a heavily industrial area.
Yes, very good. So we have another kind of reference point for this: economic, cosmic, and industrial. So this is very much a 19th century paragraph. The 18th century did not have black snowflakes. London in the 19th century had black snowflakes. So, Michael.
Well, yeah, I was going to pick up on what you said. I mean, London period, that's a date line. It's not a byline, it's a date line. You know, if you look at, you know, any contemporary newspaper, the city from where the correspondent is reporting, you know, it's in the first line, London, New York, you know, that's where the correspondent, the correspondent is. But I think the other dimension of time that's present in the paragraph is geologic time and new ideas of geology. The idea of a dinosaur going up Holborn Hill after the waters have receded. You know, we're at the heyday now in the mid 1850s of the beginning of geology. And Lord Kelvin Lord Kelvin's studies about absolute zero and the nature of temperature.
I didn't hear you. Very smart.
Have also come into play. The heat death of the sun, the heat death of the universe is a geological concept. So we go from the beginning of time to the end of time, but in geological terms, which again, you know, is typical of Dickens's both his wide reading in the contemporary sciences, but his brilliance as a writer.
Yes, exactly. And science is very much in the air at the time. That's not a pun intended, but it's like the snowflakes. It's everywhere. People are thinking. This is before Darwin, but Lyell and other geologists have been examining the fossil record, which calls into question the biblical story of the creation. And we have as if the waters had newly retired from the face of the earth is a reference to Genesis. So we have two versions of creation, two versions of the origin, and perhaps the death of the universe. So, Peter. Unmute.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I was going to say something about that. But not only is there a sort of an enormous distance, you know, of temporal distance associated with it, but it's like, this time around, I was struck by the foot passengers jostling one another's umbrellas and the general infection of ill temper. It's almost like we get a picture of the city that's filled up with people who have no relationship to each other. It's kind of like they're just bouncing off each other in the middle of the street. And they have no social relationships. So it's already introducing that particular theme, you know, the sort of disconnectedness of people from each other when, you know, the novel is going to show that actually they are all connected, you know, by this disease. But it introduces the theme of sort of like social alienation in the people. You know, and the narrators like looking at this all very distantly, you know, almost, you know, semi-scientifically, sociologically, you know.
Yes. Oh, very good comments. Sarah. This is an urban novel. And I'll just make one other comment in response to Peter before Sarah speaks. This is a novel, one of whose structures is the alternation between city and country. This is a great novel about the city and about the forms of alienation and also possible connection that exist in an urban environment. But city versus country and the different visions of the past and of the future that are implied by those two locations. So, Sarah.
So I just want to reply to Peter and to what you said. That in the section of the weather, he describes the people, but the people cannot be connected because the weather, because they lose their footing, they slide, they don't have a stable place to stand on. And I think in this context, he describes the people, but he then later on describes the people, the characters in the novel in the same terms, the same way that he describes the weather, like they're foggy, they cannot think clearly, they are not stable, they keep sliding, they cannot make a decision. So this was fascinating. And another thing that I could feel, that he's very critical, that he's very angry about something. And I think for the students and for a book, even if I didn't understand the first 2 chapters at the beginning, it kind of makes me want to read more to figure out what he's so upset about. What does he think so strongly about?
That, I think that's a very good observation, that this voice that comes from where? I mean, we don't know who is speaking, what perspective is being offered, but it is an angry voice, and it's angry at the conditions of existence, particularly in the law court. So increasingly, this chapter will focus on the law, and the law is a place where there is an infection of ill temper, where there is slipping and sliding, where there are walls of words, another phrase that occurs just a little bit later, where language itself is not a stable ground of communication. And of course, one of the other things that we need to know is, why are those people slipping and sliding in the streets? They're not paved. They're not paved streets. And, you know, in order to get from one sidewalk or wooden framed sidewalk where there is no mud, you have to travel through the mud to the other side. And to do that, you're going to slip and slide unless someone can clear the way for you. So there were people who made their livings by cleaning the way for foot passengers to cross through the mud. David.
I think the background that the readers would have known is that London was heated and cooked with coal. So these black snowflakes are from burning coal. The London fogs stopped being so bad in the 20th century once they phased out coal as a common fuel. As for the street crossings, one of the things that they, Victorians, didn't need to be told that we do is that there were tens of thousands of horses in London. So a lot of what you were walking on was horse droppings. These were particularly a problem for the women because they wore long skirts. Just Dickens is assuming that his readers know these things, but that's why the air is polluted, why the walking is foul.
Yes, very, very good observations as well. And just parenthetically, London was not a great industrial center. The great industrial centers were in the north, in Birmingham and Manchester. In London, the dirt in the air is from the burning of coal more than it is from factories. There were few factories in the area surrounding London. London was the great urban metropolis, the center of banking and of money and of the law, and not a place where factories were as important. But Catherine, go ahead, please.
She has to unmute herself.
Thank you. Sorry about that. One of the things I love about how he wrote this part, it kind of goes back to what Glenna was saying about how it's really impressionistic. It's almost all in fragments. Like he doesn't write a complete sentence, I don't think, until the second page. It's just like layers of like description, like implacable November weather, mud in the streets, smoke lowering down, dogs, horses. And then in the second paragraph, fog, 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 fog. So he's almost putting us right in this crazy environment and almost like saying like you guys have to understand what's happening before I can tell you the story, because otherwise you might not get the story unless you get how intense this environment is. I think it's really remarkable.
Yes, there are no complete sentences for a full page or more in the novel, and that I think adds to a disorientation. This is deliberately written in such a way to put up obstacles to readers, to disorient them rather than to locate them in a specific observable time and place. I mean, it both is specific in that it's London and it's specific in that it's the 19th century. But could we, for example, Courtney, yes, I'll stop for a second. Courtney, please.
So Tom has something to say, and Pat, I'm Pat Thorne. I'm not sure if you wanted to add something as well. So,
Okay.
Tom.
My name is Tom Walsh. First, I want to say how interesting all the comments have been so far. I never realized it could be so intense. But in my view, the entire paragraph is cinematic. I'm an old film fan, and particularly Alfred Hitchcock's beginnings of his films. He goes from the general to the specific visually. And this paragraph says London for the overview, and it gradually works its way down to where Dickens wants to start. And I think that's brilliant. For the time that he wrote it, is brilliant. And I hope to learn so much more. I've learned more so far.
Good. And people have often commented on the cinematic quality of Dickens's writing. So
thank you.
Did Pat Bourne want to make a contribution?
Sure, I
Thank you,
will.
Courtney.
Okay. I actually wanted to agree with you, John. I think the young students really were set up poorly actually, there are other Dickens novels that flow more easily in the beginning. This one is tough, but it is typical Dickens. And the writing is beautiful, and it does but I agreed with what everyone said. That's why I took my hands down, because Glenna had such a good point,
Okay.
as did Patricia. And but what it is also doing, I think, is showing the passage of time, and he's giving us a warning about the miserable passage of time in the world of law and in the world of courts. That's kind of because he's talking about dinosaurs. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's sort of what I get from it.
That megalosaurus is funny, don't you think? I mean, you have to appreciate the humor of this as well as the sort of cosmic scientific dimension of it. Dickens is a funny writer. Those snowflakes are funny snowflakes. That megalosaurus waddling up Holborn Hill is funny. So Wayne, and then Wendy.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. I wasn't sure my microphone was working. I don't know. I don't want to interrupt, but Courtney, do we have time for my first slide that shows the megalosaurus?
Oh.
Wayne, I'm sorry we didn't load your slides for this.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Yes.
No problem.
Yes. Do you want to comment though on which the slide would have shown?
Well, you've already mentioned that the discovery of bones in Oxfordshire set in motion the debate about the beginning of the world.
Yes.
Dickens exaggerates the size. The actual Megalosaurus was actually similar to the Tyrannosaurus Rex in build and 20 feet from a nose to tail, which is still very large, but
Yes.
not 40 feet. So that's all basically I had on my first slide.
Yeah.
Is there was a statue of a Megalosaurus in the Crystal Palace Park by 1854. So that's a year after the novel came out, but Dickens possibly had seen the statue, which shows an imaginative reconstruction of the Megalosaurus.
Okay. Yes. Another.
Just one other comment. I love the
Yes.
comments about sentence fragments,
Yes.
because as a high school teacher, I sometimes had visiting writers tell students, "Oh, that's okay. You can write sentence fragments." And I used to say, "No, use fragments or write sentence fragments only if you know exactly what you're doing. Otherwise, you'll look stupid." So here, Dickens knows exactly what he's doing with all these fragments. That's it.
Learn to write a full sentence before you deliberately write fragments. Wendy, and
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, yes. The astonishment on page 15 of The Penguin, which is just the third page of the first chapter, to suddenly find myself in Washington, D.C. This is the Court of Chancery, which has its decaying houses and its blighted lands in every shire, which has its worn out lunatic in every madhouse, and its dead in every churchyard. So instantly I'm in the Trump administration and I'm in the pandemic, which is the way in which Dickens always seems to just cross time and speak to me now. And the end of that, which has its ruined suitor, meaning the one who's brought case after case and ended up completely destroyed financially, which so exhausts finances, patience, courage, hope, so overthrows the brain and breaks the heart, that there is not an honorable man among its practitioners who would not give, who does not often give the warning, suffer any wrong that can be done you, rather than come here. So the echoes of that sense of the brain and the heart just being overloaded, which so describes how I feel in our times right now. Again, that moment where Dickens just crosses the centuries and says, "I'm talking to you now."
Very, very appropriate connections between then and now. Dickens is making a powerful social critique that focuses on the law. We could focus in our own time on injustice as perpetrated by members of the judiciary, and Dickens is attuned to that. Dickens will talk later in the novel about politics, electoral politics, which is also something that resonates with contemporary issues. So yes, the timelessness of and the timeliness of Dickens's writing is something we should appreciate. So thank you for those comments.
Yes, and I would just say that no matter where you find yourself on the political spectrum, it speaks. Whoever you think the lunatics are, it still speaks. In other words. So
Yes.
Thank you, John. Good to be here.
So, Paul.
I was 80. I just turned 80, and when I went to high school, we read David Copperfield. And when I had children later in life, and she read Hard Times or something like that. And then I don't expect that her child is going to read any Dickens at all. When she gets to high school, it's too hard. And when I think about this too hard and can't read issue, it frightens me to think that Dickens was a popular entertainment. And I wonder if, John, if you had any remarks about the context of something that hard being popular.
Well, it's interesting to read and to read about the contemporary response to Bleak House because David Copperfield had been a bestseller, and Dickens's reputation, what made Dickens a popular novelist, was his comedy. And people often would, or reviewers rather, that is, professional readers writing for the press, would regret the fact that we no longer have in Dickens the author of the Pickwick Papers, which is a rollicking, joyous, comedic novel that has a group of middle-aged men traveling through the country and getting into various forms of trouble. But none of it, or at least for most of it, of the novel, none of it is really very serious. And in David Copperfield, the novel immediately before this, there were scenes of David's courtship, for example, where he makes fun, the novel makes fun of David as a suitor in the tight clothes that he wears in order to impress his sweetheart. And Mr. Micawber is a comic figure. Bleak House has few aspects of that kind of lighthearted comedy. So the contemporary response to Bleak House was muted. It was not thought of by reviewers as the Dickens that they wanted to read. The writer of comic novels. And this is not to say that Bleak House is lacking in comedy, but it's a more subtle kind of comedy. It's a comedy that is mixed with this much darker social apprehension and political apprehension and psychological apprehension that readers had trouble with. And they also had trouble with the Esther narration. And we've spent all this time talking about one paragraph, if you realize, and we haven't talked about Esther Summerson at all. And we need to move on to that. But I will, before I ask Barb and Glenna to speak, I will do one other thing, which is to ask if anyone could give a plot summary of chapter 1. Another way of asking this question, and it's a trick question, I will confess from the front. What happens in chapter 1? And the reason it's a trick question is that almost nothing happens in chapter 1. There is one piece of plot. So if I were to say what happens in chapter 1, the Lord Chancellor at the end of the chapter orders that 2 young persons should be put in custody of a guardian who is their cousin. The Lord Chancellor thinks it's their uncle or their grandfather, and the Lord Chancellor is confused. But that's the only thing, that's the only piece of plot in chapter 1. The rest of it is all description. So what happens in chapter 1? And my answer is language happens. Language happens. This incredible machine, if you will, this impersonal voice has set in motion a discourse, a language that is cosmic in scope, that is comic, that is scientific, that is legal, that stretches to the megalosaurus, to the beginning and the end of the world. That's what happens in chapter 1, is language and a particular voice. But there's not much plot. Barely any plot happens in chapter 1. So Barb, and then Glenn.
I just want to mention that we've been talking about how timeless this beginning is, but I want to mention that he's got a lot of present participles and present progressive verbs when he uses verbs in it. And to me, those are also create a sense of timelessness, because in discourse, when we say, I'm ironing, I could be actually ironing right now, or it's in a state of being in the present. And I as I read it this time, I have more grammar news, but I'll be quiet now.
Yes, we need people who know grammar and participles, intransitive verbs as opposed to transitive verbs. I mean, that kind of detailed analysis of the language of this passage adds to the timelessness and the confusion, because we don't know exactly when this is happening. We don't have the usual reference points of time and space that help us to feel we are in a secure location. And in the second paragraphs, I'm not going to read them because they would be equally wonderful, but the fog paragraphs, you know about the fog paragraphs. One of the, and I don't have the passage to read, but one of them is imagines someone going up in a hot air balloon and is surrounded by fog. And I think that sense of being lost in the fog without a sense of up and down and, foot on the ground. You don't have a foot on the ground in this chapter because there's too much mud and too much horse shit. The reader is disoriented, and I think those college English majors, juniors and seniors, are reacting in a way that makes sense because they are disoriented. And that's part of the effect of this novel, that wants to disorient its readers before it brings them back to a more secure location. Glenna.
I wanted to address the issue of Dickens losing some kind of popular appeal over time. There's an excellent book about the US called Highbrow, Lowbrow by Lawrence Levine, about this process of kind of separating highbrow and lowbrow and sacralizing highbrow as in the course of the 19th century as being not really fit for the hoi polloi. And he talks about primarily Shakespeare and how Shakespeare was, performed in gold rush camps. It was rollicking fun, and people did not think they were doing something highly cultivated. And then there's a book that I read years ago about San Francisco in the early stages of, the gold rush San Francisco. Verdi operas were performed with amazing frequency. There was an appetite for Verdi. There was an appetite for Shakespeare, and nobody thought it was high culture. So I just throw that out there.
Okay. Catherine, no. Yes, Catherine. And
this is just really short.
Yes, thank you.
I think that even though this chapter does not have a lot of Dickens humor, I think he does throw us some funny moments with the classic funny names that Dickens always does. The first person to talk to the Lord High Chancellor is Mr. Tangle, which is funny and also reflects the mess that has been painted for us in the chapter so far. And then we meet Mr. Drizzle, Mizzle, and Chisel or something. And then we also get Mr. Blowers. So that and the interaction between Mr. Tangle and the Lord High Chancellor is pretty comical. If you read that, you know, the Chancellor says something to him, and then Dickens puts in parentheses, Mr. Tangle crushed, which is just really funny. That's at the bottom of page 18.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. You're correct to keep our eye on the comedic dimensions of Dickens, and names is certainly one of them. What is the first word spoken aloud in this chapter? This is a test of how well you read. Because dialogue is another way in which novels frequently locate characters, give us characters. What's the first word spoken aloud in this chapter? I'm doing this by memory, so I hope I'm correct. It's Mr. Tangle.
Oh yeah, it's Malud, where he, right? Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Where he
Yes.
speaks to the Lord Chancellor, but it sounds like he's saying mud almost.
Yes.
Instead of my
Yes.
lord.
And what is the phrase that he's saying? I mean, translate it in, you're a high school, so you know, a college student, translate that into your own words. What is he?
My lord.
He's saying my lord, which is the proper way of address, the form of address when you speak to the judge. But it comes out as this kind of abbreviation, led, and you're right, it's mud. So this is also about, it's comedy, and it's also Dickens playing with language. And we'll encounter these kinds of language games at many points in the novel. And that's one of the things that you need to read for in Dickens. That's why you should read slowly. And, you know, we've spent an hour, more than an hour, talking about one paragraph, and we haven't gotten very far. That's what the novel is doing to us. We haven't gotten out of chapter 1. Could anybody give me a plot summary of chapter 2 very quickly? Like you know, the plot summary I gave you of chapter 1.
Well, we meet a bored aristocrat.
That's a character, but that's not a plot.
Okay, well,
a plot is an action.
Okay. Mrs. The bored aristocrat lady faints, and it's not clear why, because she's seen something that catches Tulkinghorn's attention as well. There's something about the writing.
Yes.
There's something about the writing of the document that makes her ill, and Tulkinghorn notices. So there's some mystery.
There's some mystery. And what is the speech? Speech is important. What does Lady Dedlock say at that moment?
A faintness unto death.
That's the narrator.
Oh, no, doesn't Lady Dedlock say? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I don't remember.
She asks a question.
Who wrote it? Who wrote it? Who wrote it?
Who wrote that? Who wrote that?
Mm-hmm.
Aha. So, yes. And Tulkinghorn, the lawyer, notices. That's basically the plot of chapter 2. We get a lot of description, background. We learn a lot about the Dedlocks. This is a small point, but in what is the form of that the narrator, the narrative voice uses to refer to Lady Dedlock? Narrator refers to her as my lady.
Mm-hmm.
Think about my lady. What is my lady? I mean, remember Mr. Tangle addressed the Lord Chancellor as my lord. my lord? What does my lady? Why my lady? Why should the narrator refer to her as my lady?
Well, the narrator gives us with a couple, I mean, we know that we will find out, we will come to find out that she's not the lady that she seems to be, in the same way that she's not childless. Which Lady Dedlock, who was childless, but she's not. I know we're not supposed to go outside the bounds of the.
we do need to move ahead though. So
she is anything but a lady, is it in the eyes of society when she's unmasked?
Well, let me excuse me. I'll interrupt and just say a little bit here about social class. One of the ways in which this novel is unusual in Dickens's oeuvre, in Dickens's novelistic production, is that it spends a lot of time in the aristocracy. The class dimensions, the class range of this novel goes from Sir Leicester and Lady Dedlock, who are at the very top of society, even though he is a baronet, which is a relatively low position in the hierarchy of the aristocracy. He is, by virtue of his descent, at the very top. He's as old as the hills. And one of the things he likes about Jarndyce and Jarndyce is that it too is as old as the hills. It has been gone on, and anything that is old must be good, according to Sir Leicester. And what do we know about his wife? We know that she is from a lower social class, that she did not bring anything into the marriage because that is financially. She brought her beauty, and she, by virtue of her marriage, has become Lady Dedlock, and she too is at the pinnacle of society. And one of the voices that we hear in chapter 2 is the fashionable intelligence. And the fashionable intelligence is in some ways the narrator, or behind the narrator of chapter 2. And the fashionable intelligence always refers to Lady Dedlock as my lady, because that's how you address, if you are a follower of the aristocracy, you address and refer to her as my lady, because she's at the very pinnacle of society. But that term, my lady, keeps echoing through this entire chapter. And it turns out that my lady is someone who holds herself aloof from society, but all of the merchants know how to get to Lady Dedlock. They know what pleases her. She's transparent to them. They see through her frozen demeanor. And we too are invited to think of her as someone who has a surface demeanor and who has hidden depths. So Cynthia, and then Michael again.
Thank you. I was just noticing that chapter 2 says the world of fashion is deadened. And not only do we go from deadened to deadlock, but malady sounds like malady.
Very good. I hadn't thought of that, but I think you're right. And we had the reference to an infection of ill humor of the foot passengers in the streets of London. So disease metaphors. I hadn't thought of that, but let's keep our eye on it. Very good. And of course, the two chapters in Chancery and in Fashion point to a similarity, some kind of connection. We move from the city to the country. What are the similarities between the world of chancery and the world of fashion that we will investigate in chapter 2. So Michael, again.
You know, I was not as a first-time reader, but I had never noticed before until I was listening to the Mary Margolis reading of the novel that Lady Dedlock is portrayed as a puppet, as someone who was easily manipulable by the her purveyors, by her servants, by
Yes.
the people in her orbit, and the whole notion of what it means to have agency in the novel. Again, it had never struck me, and I'm not sure how it resonates thematically through the rest of the novel. This notion that she is helpless at the hands of those who manipulate her, because over the course of the novel, we see her emerge ultimately as a strong, determined, resolute figure. But this lack of agency, the fact that I'm not sure what to make of it. I had never noticed it before, though.
Yes, yes. So she's someone who is very guarded. She holds a fan before her face. That's a motif that gets repeated, and yet people are able to manipulate her easily or see through her disguise, if you will, and that becomes important. So Barb Rainey and then Jessica again. There,
I just want to mention, don't want to leave this chapter without my favorite introduction to Lord Dedlock, about how he likes to see his land, but only when it's enclosed by fences.
Yes.
Which to me is very indicative of his character.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, he wants it all to be his, to be owned by him and controlled by him. And if you go back to the opening of the lands in England, that was a big deal when people started fencing everything up and claiming claiming the place for their own. And there still are places, thoroughfares through enclosed lands where normal people can walk even though the land is owned by somebody. But I just love the fact that to me it implies it has his stamp, back to what somebody else said, it's going to be, he wants to have his wonderful ballroom just the way he wants it.
The enclosure acts of the late 18th and early 19th century were a crucial development in land ownership and in earlier times before the enclosure acts, there were free commons. That is, areas where anyone could graze their animals, could cultivate the land. And with the enclosure acts, there was the enforcement of private ownership and private property. So that issue and the conflict, the class conflict between the commoners and the aristocratic landowners is very much in the background of that sentence and of the way in which class differences are presented in this novel. So again, a topical reference. Jessica.
And just again, returning to the idea of people who are new to this book, of this book being challenging to start, I think, so much happens in these early chapters and you're like jumping from one perspective to another and one place to another. And it can be quite disorienting, but I think what we have to notice is the recurrence of Jarndyce and Jarndyce. And so we heard about it, and then Lady Dedlock it's being reported to her about it. And then we skip to Esther and Ava and Richard and everything. And so even though we don't understand how these narratives have anything to do with each other, we can notice this one commonality, that this is the through line that in some way is connecting these characters, even though we don't know why that matters or in what way it is going to impact these characters.
Yes, yes, good observations and carefully worded so as not to give away too much. But yes, we have to think about these connections, and Jarndyce is a through line. Lady Dedlock from a lower class marrying an aristocrat, an important aristocrat, brings very little in the way of financial resources to the marriage, but she does bring some connection to Jarndyce and Jarndyce. That's, if you will, her dowry. That's what she adds to the Dedlock world. Yes, David, gonna.
Okay. Trying to clarify British social structure, working up in people with titles. A knight is the lowest title. It's not hereditary. The knight's wife is still Lady so-and-so. Baronetage was invented under James I around 1605 or thereabouts as a revenue enhancement. You could buy a baronetage. The title was hereditary. It's still no great thing as a title. Although, if you know your Jane Austen, some people, like Anne Elliot's father, pride themselves a great deal on being a baronet. Then there are 5 levels of the peerage. I hope I can get these right. Earl, which is a very old title. Baron, that may be below Earl, I forget. Somewhere in here you get a Viscount, which was imposed. The top level is Duke. The dukes are often children of the sovereign, legitimate or illegitimate. But one of the things that the British do to confuse you as a reader of history is members of the peerage get promoted to a new level and a new title. So in the index, somebody suddenly becomes a whole different name. But
You're always better on the peerage, David, than I am. So thanks for reminding us about these hierarchies. The thing that is surprising is that Sir Leicester, as a baronet, is, although that's low in the hierarchy, is at the top of the social hierarchy and confers that status upon Lady Dedlock. So anyway, I'm going to, Glenna, keep it short, and I'm going to jump
Okay.
elsewhere.
All right. I just wanted to say one of my favorite aspects of this novel I love so much is the character of Sir Leicester. And in this, his trajectory as a character, and I'm not going to go into the whole, I'm not trying to do any spoilers, but the picture we get beginning in chapter 2 is of someone who is so clueless, so much, so much class, white male privilege, etc. And he's so smug, and there's gentle fun being poked. But anyhow, I think he's one of the more interesting characters in this wonderful novel.
We barely meet any characters in chapter 1. There are references to people like the little mad lady and the man from Shropshire and the lawyers and so on, but there's no character that we can identify with and say this story is about this character. In chapter 2, we find some characters, and they belong to the aristocracy, and they too are in a dead world that resembles. They are the power elite, the social elite, and it turns out also the political elite, even though Sir Leicester is himself not an astute individual. His rank and his social power give him political power as well, although that political power may be challenged by people from other, because the world of 19th century England is changing and class structure is changing. But we still don't have a plot yet. We have the inklings of a plot. Who wrote that? A question. We then move to chapter 3. Courtney, could you bring up chapter 3's beginning? Oh, we read so slowly. This novel requires it. I have a great deal of difficulty in beginning to write my portion of these pages, for I know I am not clever. I always knew that. I can remember when I was a very little girl, indeed, I used to say to my doll when we were alone together, "Now, Dolly, I am not clever. You know very well, and you must be patient with me like a dear." And so she used to sit propped up in a great armchair with her beautiful complexion and rosy lips, staring at me, or not so much at me, I think, as at nothing, while I busily stitched away and told her every one of my secrets. My dear old doll, I was such a shy little thing that I seldom dared to open my lips and never dared to open my heart to anybody else. It almost makes me cry to think what a relief it used to be to me when I came home from school of a day to run upstairs to my room and say, "Oh, you dear faithful Dolly, I knew you would be expecting me." And then to sit down on the floor, uh, leaning on the elbow of her great chair and tell her all I had noticed since we parted. I had always a rather noticing way, not a quick way, oh no, a silent way of noticing what passed before me and thinking I should like to understand it better. I have not by any means a quick understanding. When I love a person very tenderly, indeed, it seems to brighten, but even that may be my vanity. So, what a different beginning this is from the paragraphs and the chapters that we have been discussing so far. And just to make a reference to the contemporary and even the more recent responses to Bleak House, why it was not as popular, for example, as David Copperfield or as Dombey and Son had been, was that people were puzzled by contemporary readers, Victorian readers, were puzzled by this voice, by this, is this the heroine of the novel? She seems kind of namby-pamby, not a very interesting person. At least that was the response that a lot of people had to her. So tell me your response to this beginning after having read and discussed the other opening chapter paragraph. What is going on? Yes, Jessica.
Well, certainly she's so different from Lady Dedlock, who is, despite her upbringing or her background, certainly holds herself apart from society, and you get the sense of feeling superior to society, and not deigning to give attention to others, and certainly acting the part of a lady. And then you have this new voice, Esther, who could not be more down on herself, could not speak less kindly about herself if she tried, and it's such a shift from this one woman to another, and how I'm trying to speak carefully, and just what what a what a what a shift it is, and how, again, confusing and disorienting it could be for the reader to, like, oh, okay, it's another voice, it's another woman who does not seem to be connected with anyone else, and what's going on, and how confusing that is. And are we supposed to like her, or are we supposed to feel sorry for her? And since we're being given her in first person, it seems like she's important. It's a real shift.
Good start. David.
I think one of the things with Esther throughout the book is we're having to consider her as a narrator. Does she tell us everything? Is her self-evaluation correct? She's certainly not omniscient, but she's also, as a personality, she's not always correct about herself.
Okay, Wayne, I'm just going to run quickly through people's responses.
About Esther, 2 early reviewers of the novel really liked Esther and were really impressed by what they felt was Dickens' ability to pretend or make his narrator a woman, have a womanly tone. However, Charlotte Bronte, who reviewed the novel in the early stages, did not like Esther, considered her weak and twaddling.
Yes, that's the word I was looking for.
If you compare Esther to Jane Eyre, perhaps. But varied reactions to poor Esther.
Very different reactions to Esther. It's one of the differences between the voice of in the first 2 chapters and the voice in Esther's chapter is that Esther writes primarily in the past tense, and the omniscient narrator, let's go, the impersonal narrator of the other chapters, writes in the present tense. We noticed all of those participles and progressive verbs in the opening of so past and present, first person and third person, omniscient, if we can use that term. So the contrasts are obvious and striking. Barb.
Well, starting out with this self-deprecating sort of poor me section, you really have just to have come away with the feeling that whether you're going to be able to, whether she's reliable or not. You know, even when she starts to tell more of her story, since it's from her perception, we don't know who to whether we believe her or not at the beginning.
Okay.
And I think we do believe that there are coal snowflakes at the beginning of the whole novel. You know, I think we do believe that.
Okay. Okay. Any other reactions just to the and the whole chapter? And I'll say Glenna and then Pat raised her hand.
Well, I think Esther is absolutely fascinating. And it seems to me that the very self-deprecating young woman we meet in this chapter, it's like the whole idea of an abused childhood, Dickens has given us, well, the first person narration in David Copperfield. I just finished rereading Nicholas Nickleby and Smike. So obviously the theme, the situation of a mistreated child is one that is very important to Dickens. And to me, this seems like, he has another, he's going even deeper into how to portray, to dramatize the situation of an abused child.
Okay. Pat, and she.
I'll be glad to talk, even though I didn't raise my hand, but.
Well, I saw you raise a finger.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, here's the orphan. He's introduced the orphan. And those of us in the Pickwick Club just finished reading The Old Curiosity Shop, and there's little Nell, and it's a similar personality right now. But will she develop as time goes by is the question, because I think sort of even towards the end of chapter 7, she's starting to develop into having some strength. And I don't know, that's just my recollection of the 7 chapters. Okay, I'm lowering my hand.
Okay, thanks. Good. Courtney.
Okay, so we have Pat Vinci, Cynthia, and then Trudy. So Pat Vinci, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Pat already spoke.
Nope, other Pat.
Pat Vinci.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. No, I want to bring it back to Dickens. I think it's a clever ploy the way he started that, to introduce her as a ploy to draw his audience into his sentimentality, the way he described her. And they're going to make a connection, because that's how the Victorians were. They put a lot of value on this. And of course, later critics are on Dickens' case about being too sentimental. But I think that's what he was doing here, introducing Esther that way. And that's all I have to say.
Okay. Whether Esther is sentimental or not is something we should keep in mind as we go, or does she sometimes be sentimental and sometimes not? It's true that she cries a lot. And tears are often a signal of sentiment in Dickens's novels, as in other Victorian novels. But
that was real big in the 19th century, tears.
yes.
The men cried, we're dumbed down and numbed down.
Yeah.
Whatever. But I'm saying when he wrote that, that's what he appealed to by, discussing the doll and her feelings. That's all she had, really. So sad.
We should talk about that doll, because the doll, of course, is a figure that appears later in this chapter.
So Cynthia and then Trudy.
Thank you. I am so confused by the time periods of the narrators that I'm going to confuse myself even trying to put it into a question. I know that Esther is writing in the past about her life, and the omniscient narrator is writing in the present, but they have and will begin to have parallel stories for the same time period. So I can't really figure out what's happening with that. It's almost like, for me, some kind of Star Trek-y time travel. So John, if you can say anything to help me, I would appreciate it.
Okay, you raise a good point. Esther is writing this narrative of her early life in the past tense. So we cannot know who it is that is writing these sections. It's an older Esther, but the plot has not caught up with who Esther will become at the end of the novel. But we need to keep in mind that the voice that is writing is an older Esther, writing about experiences that happen to her younger self. That's the form of autobiography, is you write about the past. But it's an oversimplification to say that Esther writes always in the past tense. Because if you look at the first sentence, I have a great deal of difficulty writing with my portion of these pages. She's writing in the present tense about her difficulty of writing about her past self. So there are two time frames, but the plot, we now have a plot that we can follow. The plot is the plot of the younger Esther, whose childhood we are being given. And that plot catches up with the time frame of the other story, the other narrative, because Esther, when she is at school, gets a letter that says, you need to come to Chancery. And she goes to Chancery, where she encounters Ada and Richard, Ada Clare and Richard Carstone. And she is engaged by the Court of Chancery to be a companion to Ada Clare in the household of Mr. Jarndyce. So that's the plot. That's the, if you will, you want the plot summary. And that's where the story of Esther catches up with the story that we got that little glimpse of back in chapter 1, when the Lord Chancellor says 2 young persons will be lodged in the household of a guardian, Mr. Jarndyce. So Esther will now be a resident in Bleak House, the house of Mr. Jarndyce, as a companion to Ada Clare. And we might ask in passing, why does Ada Clare need a companion? Why does the court assign Esther, who is a random orphan? There's no connection between Esther and anyone else that we know of in the novel. She's an orphan. It turns out that, you know, Glenna has told us about her abused childhood. How is she abused? She's an orphan. She has no mother. She has no father. She wonders about who her mother and father might be. That's a question that the novel will ask Esther to pursue and ask us to pursue as well. But why is Esther assigned to be a companion to Ada Clare? I'll answer my own question. The Lord Chancellor has already asked if Mr. Jarndyce is married, and the answer is no. You can't put an unmarried young woman into a household with a bachelor. So you need to have a female companion of the same age, roughly, or could be older, with Ada in order to make this a safe space, sexually speaking, in terms of Victorian conventions. So that's why, and it seems to be a kind of random assignment, because there's no previous connection between Ada and Richard on the one hand, and Esther on the other. So does that explain the time connection?
It's very helpful to hear you talk about how the plots come together in time. Thank you.
Okay, good.
And then Trudy.
Yes, Trudy.
Thank you. John, I'm glad you brought up the question about when Esther is writing, and I liked your answer. Could I offer that the connection is through Mr. Jarndyce?
but if I were going to explain that, you'd probably cut my mic off. The other thing I wanted to say that just came up as we were talking. I have been reading this novel, I think, at maybe 10-year intervals since 1963. And this was the first time it ever occurred to me to wonder when Esther was doing this writing. I think she's doing it about 20 years after she starts, maybe 30. And that satisfies me. And as far as Esther's personality,
yes,
this time around, I feel that Ada or Ada, which is it? How are we pronouncing her name?
I say Ada, but
Ada, okay, Ada's fine. Ada, Esther, and Richard are almost insufferable. I'm finding it very difficult to put up with their shenanigans and their arrogance and self-pity and self-involvement. It's almost worse than Skimpole. But I'm finding the writing so absolutely beautiful and wonderful and so connected and so spiderweb threaded back and forth through the plots. And again, I will keep my mouth shut about that, that I really don't care. I don't care that I find them totally unbelievable characters. And I'm having a wonderful time reading this, and thank you all for helping me out with it.
Your irritation with Richard in particular, but the Richard Ada combination as a love story. This is the this is the love story that all Victorian novels present, and the most interesting part about it for me is the way that Esther is sort of in between Richard and Ada, and is enjoying. She has no love interest of her own at this point, but she's enjoying the romantic connection that takes place between them. So Esther is not a stranger to romance. She gets it vicariously, at least at this stage in her development.
Which is part of the sliminess, as far as I can see. And when you were talking about the marriage plots, my thought was it's not 3 seconds into Richard and Ada meeting each other that he is slobbering over her. So that's a marriage plot that starts out, or a potential marriage plot that starts out quite early. Anyway, thank you.
We have only 5 minutes left, and there are lots more passages that I had prepared, but I want to jump. Courtney, could you please jump to the illustrations? And I want to show you the 4 illustrations and have a little bit of discussion about them. So this is the first illustration in the novel, and because it's the first, it is an important illustration. So you will see it has a caption, "The Little Old Lady." And I should say something about the way in which this is not a faithful reproduction of the original illustration, because the caption at the bottom, "The Little Old Lady," is in a modern font, and in the original illustrations, it was in a cursive font, and it was inside the illustration and not in a font that recalls the font of the modern edition that we are reading. So that's just a little technical thing. But tell me what this scene depicts, and comment on the title, the caption.
I can't read the title, but it's when Ada, Richard, and
Esther.
Thank you, Esther first meet Miss Flight.
Yes. Okay. And they're in front of Chancery, presumably. Right. That's where Miss Flight hangs out. Miss Flight is the name of the little old lady who is a petitioner at Chancery, one of the many petitioners who expects a judgment. And you can tell from the background of this illustration that this is the London fog, because the horses and the coach in the background are obscured by the dirty snowflakes. So is there anything else of interest in this illustration? Anything remarkable that you would want to comment on?
Well, Esther is not looking at us.
Yes.
The back is turned to us.
Yeah.
Esther's back is turned to us. We do not see Esther's face.
It's like Miss Flight is addressing Esther for some reason.
Okay.
Like she's addressing her.
I will I'll put this as a question, but I'll answer it because I have an idea about it. Where is Esther looking? What is Esther looking at?
She's looking at Miss Flight, looking down.
Oh, yeah.
What Miss Flight has in her hands, maybe?
I think that the figure is positioned in such a way that you could imagine Esther as looking either at Ada or at Miss Flight. The head seems turned slightly toward the left.
Right.
The body is twisting. It's hard to tell exactly where the hips are positioned. The hips, it seems to me, are positioned so that she could be facing in between the two women. One of the tricks that is going on in this illustration is that the little old lady could be a reference to Esther. And these two women, Ada, whom we see in full face and who has golden hair and is beautiful, she has the classic oval face of the typical Victorian beauty, and Miss Flight is bowed and aged, and which is Esther's identity. What does Esther look like? Is Esther beautiful like Ada? Is Esther a little old lady? Or is being a little old lady a way that Esther can hide herself from other people? I see this image as a scene of mirroring. That is, that Esther has no face of her own, but there are two faces available to her, two female faces. One is a beautiful Esther, and the other is an aged Esther. And one of the things that Esther does is to become a housekeeper, and as she's often referred to as Dame Durden, and other images that link her with age, and she does not acknowledge that she might be beautiful, but we know that she is beautiful. How do we know that she is beautiful? Because Guppy has seen her at the law courts and he is smitten by her. So there's a romantic interest in Esther on the part of Mr. Guppy. Next slide, please. And I'm dashing to finish, and it's time to stop. So I'll go through the next illustration, please, Courtney. And Courtney, can you give me the next illustration? Again, Esther's face is obscured and she's looking at a younger woman. In what way is this a mirror scene? In what way is Caddy Jellyby a mirror image of Esther. Next slide. Again, Esther's face is concealed. We get a little peek at what might be a profile, but Esther is still hiding from us. Next slide. For the first time, we see Esther in a full profile. Esther's face will be a location of considerable interest to us and to other people in the novel. It's time to stop. I'm sorry we didn't get any farther, but we had fun, or at least I hope you had fun. I had fun. My voice is failing. Next month, the discussion of chapters 8 through 13 will continue. October 28th, Glenna Matthews will be the discussion leader. So thank you very much, and I apologize for running a little bit over. It's 3 minutes after our time. So
Thank you.
Thank you very much.